So yeah, let's all pretend, just for the course of this conversation, that we all have just arbitrarily unhackable websites. Okay, you're never going to have any kind of software vulnerability or an application flaw. Like none of your plugins are ever going to have an issue. Your host never going to have a server vulnerability, and on top of all of that, let's even say that you've got this magic firewall that like shoots an electrical shock through anybody's hands if they try to mess with your website. It can be really easy, given that situation, to believe that nothing bad is ever going to happen to that infrastructure. And the reason for that is that most threats really aren't very persistent. The vast majority of attacks that you're ever going to see against your websites are going to be automated. Things like botnets distributing brute force login attempts and vulnerability probes for whatever thing WordFence wrote about last. And for the most part, against that kind of adversary, staying up to date, maybe applying a couple of extra layers of security is plenty. But while most threats aren't persistent at all, some are. It's a different story when you become an actual target. Persistent threats, they've got more time, they've got more resources, and probably number one, they've got more guts. They're more willing to get creative and take risks here and there to accomplish what they're trying to do, whatever that may be. And unfortunately, higher ed institutions can be kind of an enticing target for a persistent attacker. Now you think about it, they have data on quite a lot of individuals. A lot of money flows through higher education institutions. They get traffic, and honestly, a lot of traffic to a lot of disparate, disjointed websites that are in varying states of maintenance and built by different people to do different things. And to top it all off, how happy is everybody in this room with your budget for all of these things that you wish you could protect against? And so that kind of persistent threat is there. But even with the magical firewall and this completely vulnerability-proof application, humans become the most vulnerable point in your infrastructure. And even now, with potentially fallible websites and firewalls that are normal, humans still are among the most vulnerable place in any organization. And today we're going to talk about why. I am Mikey Veenstra, that guy. I'm a threat analyst with WordFence, the security software a bunch of you have probably used or wish that admin would let you use. And my job is to make WordPress more secure. And I do that in a couple of different ways. I develop rules that make our firewall smarter so that it can protect against more advanced things. I study threat data so we can try to analyze what the attackers are up to from day to day. And things like assessing software vulnerabilities and notifying development teams and working with them to resolve them responsibly for everybody. But mostly I educate people. So I write on our blog, and I promise this is the last WordFence plug ever. Wordfence.com/blog. Please subscribe, it's awesome. I handle some media stuff here and there if there's an investigation that I'm a part of. But my favorite thing to do is come to events like this and share some perspective with folks like all of you on sort of what the threats are up to. Because having a little bit more perspective and awareness is a huge advantage in this world. And hopefully I can help afford you guys some of that. You all some of that. So the first thing I want to do is show everybody a video. And some of you may have seen this video. Let's see if I can blow this up all the way. Anybody recognize this? I hope the audio works.
Try to hack me and show me where my vulnerabilities are. And now I'm going to meet them in Las Vegas.
Maybe. There it is.
They're the people who use which is essentially hacking without any code. They just use a phone and a
you want to understand phishing is a wizard's team, and basically how it is used the phone to extract information or data points that can be used in a later attack.
Let's do it.
Who are you going to call? Maybe I'll call your cell phone provider and see if I can get the data in your email address.
I bet you're good.
I'm going to send you from your number, so it's going to look like it's calling from
just for 30 seconds, just to get access to my personal gaming codes.
You could call it, make changes. However you go about it, you have 7 days to turn it in through pretexting. Yeah, WPCampus probably works with pretexting to follow the law. Oh, I'm wondering. So I talked about the addons.
Jesse used my girlfriend's name and a big social security number
517.
to set up her own personal access to my account.
Where? So there's no password on my account. Can I set that up?
She even gets a support person to change my password.
Please tell me how to log in.
So she just basically locked me out of my own account.
I'll give you that. Alright, thank you.
Holy shit. You access my entire self.
You're gonna have to log into your password. That's just my name.
And all of it was a crying baby, and I don't know.
So, what are some things we noticed? Let me get this out of the way for everybody. There we go. So yeah, coming into this kind of without prior knowledge of some of the concepts that we're going to go over, what are some elements that we maybe noticed about the conversation that they had?
The help desk can do whatever they want.
Yeah. So the help desk can do whatever they want, and usually there's some amount of policy in place, maybe either technological or just a rule in a book. But a lot of what you'll find in social engineering is how you get people to skip that part. Anybody else?
I have just the baby crying and the really friendly, like, oh, I'm so sorry. It's like,
Yeah. So the baby crying and being overly friendly. So that really helps. It establishes a couple of different things. So I don't know about you, but crying babies stress me out. And when people are stressed out, they maybe don't think quite so hard about everything that's happening to them. It also, most people can sympathize with being confronted with this baby, you know, whether you've had one yourself or you've met one before. It's sort of universal, and it establishes this kind of, I really want to help this person tone for the entire conversation. Anything else? I don't want to spend too long on this slide, but anybody else notice anything? Another thing is the prompting from the husband. So it's the husband's account. We're calling from the husband's phone. My husband was like, oh, you need to do this right now, grr, grr, grr. And that also kind of establishes this, somebody is telling me to do this, somebody's telling you to do this, neither of us want to be here right now, let's help each other out, solve my problem, and get us all off the phone. And a lot of that is, it's really effective, and we're going to talk about specifically why. Now, as a warning, this isn't going to be an instructional talk on how to be really manipulative and just generally get really good at lying to people, but what I want to illustrate with some of this stuff is that human nature really is the world's oldest software vulnerability. And a couple of reasons for that: we like to be helpful, especially if we like somebody, we relate to somebody, or generally we just don't have any reason not to be helpful. That's our default setting for most people. And specifically on the other side of that, we do not like to be unhelpful. And that comes into play, you know, most people aren't comfortable telling a stranger no, especially when there's benefit of the doubt. You know, if I'm trying to get through a door that has a badge buzzer on it, and I do not have that badge, if I were to be sort of hanging out near it, holding some heavy boxes, maybe some donuts or something, like just a big old awkward stack, somebody walks through that door, and I say, oh, thank you, you're here, I forgot my badge, and you just sort of slip in, nobody's going to look around and tell you no. You know, what if they know that you're not, so obviously what if they know positively that you do not belong there is one thing, but most people are just going to assume that they're the jerk and they just don't remember you. We also defer to authority. We're very happy to bend rules as long as we think that the order to do so came from on high. After all, sure, I bent a rule, but my boss told me to, so really it's sort of on them. And that's something that people exploit in these kinds of exercises as well. Scarcity makes us stupid, and it's a little bit rude to say, but it does. Skeevy salespeople like this a lot. Like, oh, last chance for this deal, or only X amount of days remaining to take advantage of this thing. And that sense of scarcity of what I want, or scarcity of time, as we saw with the call earlier of I need to get this done right now on this one phone call. People want to move fast and people get sloppy. You can also, as a reference for this, see the entire diamond industry, but that's out of scope for this talk. All of these principles work because at its most base level, almost anyone will believe almost anything as long as they either want it to be true or they're afraid that it might be. And you're going to notice that kind of a lot of this is, oh, maybe there's something in it for me, even if that's just my own curiosity, or maybe what if they're right? What if I don't play along and this does get me in trouble, or I miss out on something? A big cornerstone of social engineering engagements is going to be pretexting. Your pretext is basically your cover story. This is, who are you? What do you want? Why do you want it? Why do you deserve to get it? Just kind of the tapestry that you're weaving to help make this whole thing believable. Depending on your goals, this could be simple. This could be like the video before, the role was exasperated young mother. The goal was to get access to my freaking phone account that I totally have access to because it's ours. And but it's just believable enough to be plausibly deniable, and people want to go along with it. Having that believable pretext is how we prevent alarms from being set off inside somebody's head. When people are easy and not suspicious, things can slide very, very generously through policy pipelines, but when people get on guard, then they're more willing to stick to the rules. So, for example, if we want to talk about our deference to authority, a very common tactic for this is the position of, well, your boss told my boss that I need to do this and I need your help to do it. Because that's exploiting a deference to authority. Your boss said this, and you're also establishing common ground and solidarity because my boss told me to do this. And so we're, on multiple levels, we're layering all of these different reasons why you should listen to me and why you should go along with this thing I'm talking about. Another video.
The news, a brazen con woman.
And the audio.
She's posing as a Walmart employee. She's managed to charge stores on $1,000. They never see a thing. You said the advertising was a scam.
Take a good look at this woman. Police say she's posing as an employee of Walmart's corporate headquarters, even wearing a company name tag. She's not currently employed, but we believe because how she knows the system that she may be a former employee of Walmart. This mystery woman tells unsuspecting Walmart cashiers she's testing the green dot money card system and convinces them to load the debit cards with $1,000 or more. She's actually had to show the cashiers a couple of occasions how to actually do it in the register. Put the card in and load the money into. In every case, the bogus employee was right at the front door, thousands of dollars richer. Sometimes this lady's voice is from the home office in another state, or she's in the store in the metro area. This Walmart imposter is as slick as a spring day all already successfully targeting stores in Oklahoma City, Del City, and 2 of Credential. She's walking out of the door with thousands of dollars in prepaid debit cards that she needs. Authorities locally cashiers have anything to do with this. Lance West, News Channel 4, HD.
Now, several laws when they say working together to catch the scam or pushing to them. If you see that suspect on your video, contact your local police department.
My favorite part of that is that she praises the video quality, but it's a really crap YouTube video. But yeah, so this is a real thing that happened, of course. Now, the police officer in the video supposes maybe that this scammer had been a previous Walmart employee. But that's really not such an easy thing to jump to. I mean, They may have been friends with somebody or family or like social media groups, like the Facebook group that everybody joins in to complain about work. It would have been very easy to sign into one of those and go, hey, I can never get those green dot cards to load right. What's the secret? And a bunch of people answer, oh, it's easy. You just do this. And then, oh, thanks. It could have seriously also just been loading a legitimate one and watching them fill it up. And so the big thing to take away with that scam being successful is that there was reconnaissance. This individual was very aware of policies and what lingo to use, like mentioning that I'm from corporate or from home office, which also is that appeal to authority. And also showing people how to do it. People are very quick to assume that you're authorized to do a thing if you're showing them how to do it. And another bit is that if anybody had bothered to check with a manager if somebody from home office was showing up, the jig would be up right away. Like, unless it's literally a surprise inspection, there is no chance that a manager would be surprised by corporate showing up. And so, like I said, building that perfect pretext requires reconnaissance, because the more you know about your target, the easier it's going to be to find something to exploit, or at least build a perfect cover. One of the most effective ways to go about doing that is through a strategy called OSINT, or Open Source Intelligence. It's just a really fancy pants way to say you Googled it. More than Google, but it's information that's freely available on the internet about an organization or an individual. So with Google specifically, like, what can you find about any of your campuses? Well, locations, building names, hours of operation, tons of phone numbers. What can we find on your website? More phone numbers, email addresses, and finding a bunch of email addresses lets us start to assemble lists of how you generate those emails. So if all of your inboxes are first initial last name at school.edu, I can, given anybody's name, probably guess what their email is and get something into their inbox. LinkedIn, everybody working for you, sharing what kind of technology they're good at and their job title and who they know at their, it helps you build name lists. You know, I know Jeff, he's the senior director of whatever. And so you're just kind of building this portfolio of information that you can use to your advantage. And again, social networks, very good for this, because it's a good place for you to learn internal jargon. An example of this in the higher ed space, actually. So the school I went to, Western Kentucky University, Bowling Green, Kentucky, go Hilltoppers. There is a building on campus, it's the Student Center, and it's called Downing University Center. If I were running an engagement at that campus, and I probably wouldn't, but if I were, and I were trying to pose as somebody who belongs there, member of staff or faculty, and I said the phrase Downing University Center, I would be promptly arrested and thrown in jail, because there's not a living soul on that campus that doesn't call that building DUC, D-U-C. So knowing those little bits can really help sell you. And it could really also, if it's something big like that, they can sell you out. And office culture, again, is another big one. If you're the only person in the room that doesn't know about the big jamboree this weekend, that's an issue. You can also catch chatter about things like open enrollment is coming up. So now I know that everybody's kind of on the lookout for HR emails asking for personal info. And all of that is just out there floating around. So just remember that somebody knowing this kind of thing should not suggest to you that they're supposed to. So we've talked about the whys, a little bit about the hows and why it's effective, but the actual attacks themselves are a big part of awareness, so you know what to look for. The big one that you've probably heard of is phishing. So there's two camps on the definition of phishing. I belong in one of them. I'm going to kind of teach you both, just in case you hear the jargon from later. I don't want it to be confusing or weird. So in a general term, phishing is just an attempt to obtain sensitive information by impersonating a trusted entity through electronic means. So this is just another form of tricking somebody. Even though you may think of it as a technological thing, this is actual hacking, not human hacking. You're still relying on somebody being fooled. So in one camp, phishing is this umbrella term that covers the other things I'm about to talk about next. In the other camp, phishing refers only to the email variety. The other ones are their own distinct thing. So classic phishing or email phishing or phishing original. Our goals in those kind of attacks are to get people to open links or fill out forms or sign into things or open attachments. HR paperwork, like I said before, is a big part of this. It's very common for people to receive another form that they have to fill out and put a bunch of personal details on, especially if you can kind of carrot and stick them with a little bit. Oh, there's a new benefit and you need to sign up, but the deadline was an hour ago and I'm really sticking my neck out letting you squeeze this in. People are going to rush to get that new benefit. It's really easy to help sell phishing emails by way of things like spoofed sender addresses. If your domain doesn't have proper SPF or DMARC set up, people can pretend to send email from any address on your domain. Doesn't necessarily mean that they'll get it if you reply, but it doesn't mean that the sender address is canonical or authoritative. You'll also see things like lookalike domains, where it looks like the legitimate domain, but not quite. And I have a really fun example of this. So there's a lot of groups of characters, like say WPCampus.org. Like if you were paying attention, you might think that that's just WPCampus.org, but it for sure says WPCarnpus.org because that R on the end there. Can anybody not quite make that out? Because I can zoom it in. Okay. Don't worry, I did buy that domain. You can't have it. It forwards to WPCampus.org. I'm not doing anything sketchy with it. But you can see things like this tricking somebody who's either on autopilot or doesn't know to look for that kind of thing. Get this out of the way again. It's always awkward. Okay. So phishing is what we saw in that first video. Phishing is phishing by way of voice communications, usually a phone call. Phishing is made easier by spoofing incoming caller ID numbers. Caller ID spoofing is pretty easy to do. It's pretty inexpensive. There's a lot of services that let you do it. If you have your own VoIP line, you could probably do it yourself for free. So a visher could spoof any incoming number, whether it's associated with the account they're calling about. Maybe it's calling from your boss's cell phone, like, oh, I found this phone, or any number of things. So be aware that can happen. And then there's smishing, which is of all of them the weirdest one to say. But smishing is just phishing over SMS or text message. I have one more example. I think that's the last time I actually have to hijack the screen there. So this was something shared by Rachel Toback. She is a big name in social engineering circles. And I love the white on green on white there, so I'll read it out loud for anybody who can't see it. It says, hey, I know you don't know me, but many years ago I used to have your number. I'm trying to log into an old account that is still tied to phone number, but it is telling me that it will send me a verification code. I'd like to know if it'd be okay with you if I request the code and if you can just text it back to me. If not, that's totally fine. So super friendly. And the response is okay. And then thank you so much, I just requested it. And then there is the 6-digit two-factor code. How many of you use two-factor via SMS? I would really, really, really love it if you didn't. Another reason, so the phishing phone call that we saw earlier, it was a cell phone provider that was called. And in the example video, it was kind of silly. She just sort of locked him out of the account, changed the name on it, changed the password, but realized she was literally one more step away from committing a SIM swapping attack, which is where she says, oh, by the way, I have a new phone. Can you move this number to this SIM card? And it's ours. They're already playing along. They've already bought into helping this individual out. Why wouldn't they think, why wouldn't they think this is suspicious? Yeah, sure. Do you have the IMEI? And if that's all it takes from that point forward, then they've hijacked your phone number and now they just get the text. They don't need to do all this about it. And luckily, this was a legitimate case. This was actually somebody who had lost access to an account and it was an old phone number. Or at least that's what they said. But there was no resistance. There was no double checking. There was nothing like that. It for sure would have worked even if it wasn't legit. Another term that you all might have heard is spearfishing. Spearfishing it's no different on a technological end of things, but it just refers to highly targeted phishing attacks. It usually only refers to the email variety of phishing in this case, but I would probably accept half credit on the test. This is stuff of the nature of, hi, Steve, your boss, Linda, asked me, Jeff, to get Kyle in accounting to approve this invoice. It's very specialized. It probably came from an internal email address, or at least presented itself as if it were from an internal email address. And it preys on policy and people knowing each other or not knowing each other. This is in contrast to a more wide net attack, like a standard phishing attack, which is going to be like, hello, DHL customer. Your package you totally ordered has a thing. You need to click here and sign into your bank account for some reason. So those attacks still get bites, or else they wouldn't do it. But the spear phishing attack is much more effective. But it does require that little bit of extra reconnaissance so that it's believable, if nothing else. There's also credential stuffing, which is another one of those, like, well, it feels like you're hacking into a website and your account, but really what you're attacking with credential stuffing is the human's laziness. For the sake of convenience, a lot of people are very happy to use the same password every single place they create an account. Maybe if you're lucky, it's a small variant on that one password that they just shove everywhere. And every time I give talks like this where I talk about password use, the audience is a little bit better about it every time. So I want to do another show of hands. How many people have a password manager that they control all of their password use through? It's pretty good, pretty good. So credential stuffing, yeah, it's where an account that was lost or breached in one attack. So for instance, the Yahoo breach a few years ago. If you use the same password everywhere, and that password was breached from one place, it probably still works in all these other places. So when somebody is performing credential stuffing, they're just amassing credentials from different places, and then they're just throwing them everywhere they can. So if you got it from LinkedIn, let's try it on Twitter, your bank, your WordPress site, everywhere. And we know it's effective because they keep doing it. Resources are expensive. I don't know what to tell you. There's also a resource that you can check called Have I Been Pwned? Has everybody heard of that? Does anybody not know of Have I Been Pwned? It's okay. Cool. So it's obviously a service. You can check your email address and your password against various breaches to see if you were present in them. I recommend signing up for the alerts because it'll tell you if you're in new ones as well, and you don't just have to keep going back and checking. And then we move from remote attacks to in-person attacks, which have a much different scope. You're going to see more remote attacks than you will in-person attacks, but they still happen. Criminals still, believe it or not, commit crimes in the real world. And just because they're rarer shouldn't mean that they should be ignored. The three that I want to discuss, because there's obviously a lot of different ways that somebody can do a crime, but the three that we talk about mostly are tailgating, shoulder surfing, and baiting. Tailgating it's really simple. It's what we talked about before with the heavy boxes. It's following somebody through a secure door into a place that you're not supposed to be. Maybe they don't know you're there and you just kind of slip in past them ninja style. Maybe you're just pretending to be one of the chums, and yep, totally supposed to be here. I'm on my way to the break room, fellow. It could be any number of things. It could be, you know, person with clipboard and safety goggles doesn't want to be messed with and just follows somebody in. It's attacking somebody's disinclination to have an awkward conversation. People don't generally like saying, no, I will not let you through this door I'm holding open. Go away. People don't want to do that, especially, again, when there's benefit of the doubt. And it's pretty reliable that people don't want to do that. There's also shoulder surfing, which is a really fancy way to say just looking at what you're doing on the screen. So maybe we're just peeping on the screen and trying to exfiltrate some sensitive data from whatever you're working on. Maybe we're watching your hands as you type your password. It's all very simple. That's why you have those polarized screen protectors, so you can only see the screen from certain angles. You see people at banks with those. They're not super expensive. If you're concerned about your privacy, I would recommend it. And then baiting is probably the most interesting one, because it's where we're leaving some sort of compromised storage media somewhere that somebody's going to find it. One of the common things that you'll see in exercises like this is maybe in a hallway or the parking lot or on the counter in one of the public bathrooms, you just find a flash drive, and in a little label on the flash drive it says 2020 proposed salary increases. I bet, were you not in this talk, or I guess in tech, but plenty of people don't know better and are very, very happy to just snatch that up, run off, skitter away, and stick it in their computer and see what's in there. And this is exploiting people's curiosity, depending on what the pretext of that USB drive is. It could be their greed. And especially when people are already doing something kind of naughty. So there's security protocols in place. Like, not everything just auto runs the second you plug it in anymore. There's security settings that you can configure to prevent that. Anybody who is thinking that they're getting a load of a bunch of new Raise information before everybody else, they're going to click allow on everything that pops up and just let whatever gross garbage lives on that flash drive flood the network or their computer or whatever. So how do you protect yourself from stuff like that? You know, if all of these people are so good at reading people, and by the way, if you are more interested in the how do I be a really manipulative person and do all of this stuff myself stuff, let me know. There's plenty of talks and plenty of material on that. But the people who are really good at this, they are really good at it. They're checking for micro expressions on your face so they can tell when you're starting to pull away from the bit. They're checking for things like, well, I don't want to ask what your first child's name is, because maybe it's your security question, but I will ask, hey, is that your kid? If you've got a photo on your desk, and you're going to say, yeah, it's Billy. And so people know how to ask leading questions and get the information without you thinking they're getting it. So that's why it's important to just have this kind of discussion early. One of the big things is, if you're not sure, verify. If you're not sure that somebody is calling from the number that they say they're calling from, offer to call them back. If they're spoofing that phone number, they won't get the call, and they know that. So if they're not spoofing, they're probably going to be fine with it. Yeah, sure, whatever, it's inconvenient, but yes, call me back. But if they're really putting up a fight, or they want to call you back, then maybe. Obviously, there's people that are just weird. You can't just assume that everybody that's weird on the phone is a visher, but it's something to check for. Similarly, if you get an email from accounting telling you to do something, or somebody's telling you to tell accounting to do something, or anything like that, ask the person who supposedly sent the email, or ask the person who would be in charge of this theoretical person if it were a made-up name. And if somebody's in the building claiming to be from IT, or from the soda company doing your refills, or anything like that, it doesn't hurt to ask. There are ways to validate somebody's employment. Stick to policy. There's probably already policy in place at just about every one of your workplaces that covers most of the things I've talked about. It may not tell you the specific attack that it's protecting against, but it's always the case. If there is a badge reader on a door, people are supposed to boop the thing so they can open it. A lot of the time, even those are used by the fire department to tell how full a building is. If you have to badge in and out, you don't want to have people tailgating in and out, even outside of security reasons. But another thing, if your admin heard that you were plugging in strange USB drives you found on the ground, they would personally murder you if they thought they could get away with it. I promise. And last, and for sure most, be aware. Okay, we talked about human nature being the world's oldest and first software vulnerability. Being aware and knowing what kind of attacks are out there and how the criminals are performing them, that's the closest thing to a patch update any of us are going to get. And if all of these attacks are just relying on people not being aware or being willing to make an exception just this once for somebody we like, or not wanting to have that awkward conversation where we don't let you into the building we're going into, if we're aware of that kind of thing, we are 1,000,000% better equipped to not be victimized by it. Any questions? Cool, were there any on the feed? Cool, yes, question.
So I have a specific question about Credential.
Okay.
So we use a single sign-on service for all of our university websites, and every time I type my username and password in, I feel that I use LastPass to manage everything, and I think to myself, oh, this is so terrible. I should not be using the same exact password on every single website that I manage. What do you do about that?
So the question was, how do you, to paraphrase, it was sort of how do you reconcile wanting to use different passwords everywhere when you've got a big, massive SSO network? And that is a really good question, one that I'm going to pause and sip some water for while I contemplate it.
I appreciate that.
The big flaw with credential stuffing is that the password was acquired from somewhere already. So if there is a breach in this SSO system, yes, everything underneath it would be breached. But if you're using the same password everywhere within it, but not anywhere else, then it would take that entire SSO network getting breached for that to be a point of failure. As opposed to if it were all separate disjointed logins, then any one of them could fail, and then you'd have a different problem. Thank you. Any other questions? Excellent. Thank you guys for showing up. Thank you all for showing up. I'm getting better.